You are tuned to 103.5 FM, the Sun Radio, WLSP-LP. You are listening to My World and welcome to it, and I am your host, Rex Owens. In this hour program, I invite listeners to learn about the world of the arts and artists. I talk with a variety of artists, including writers, playwrights, composers, musicians, and actors. I don't give my guests interview questions prior to the broadcast to ensure that our conversation is spontaneous and authentic. My guests share their stories about living a creative life. This program is live streamed at www.sunprairiemediacenter.com. The lead-in music is by Milwaukee musician, performer, and composer Carrie Sherwood from her CD, Release from the Heart, and the song is called Old Friends. Today, I'm talking with Wisconsin author Amanda Zieba. So, Amanda, why do you go by the title of the word nerd?
Yeah, I, a couple years ago, had hired a business coach to help me figure out how I was going to do this whole, writing thing as a career. And the first thing I was struggling with was trying to figure out how to brand myself because there were so many different things that I did. I was a reader and a teacher and a writer, and I like to help people. And so when we looked at all of those things, we realized that words were a part of every single aspect of what I did and of my life. And then word nerd just kind of rhymed and it sounded fun. And so we came up with it and it stuck, and I love it.
Excellent, excellent. So when did you know you wanted to devote your life to writing?
The cliche answer is I've always wanted to be a writer. But I think, when I was graduating high school and trying to decide what I wanted to major in college, my two top front runners were to be a teacher or to be a writer. And when I thought about being a writer, I didn't really know what that life looked like. I'd met a couple authors at school visits, but being a writer always felt like they lived in this almost magical fairyland, the stories they created. They didn't seem like real people to me. I didn't have any, friends whose parents worked for the newspaper, who wrote books. But teaching, I knew exactly what that life looked like. People told me I would be good at it, and I liked being around kids. And so when I went to college, I went to UW-Eau Claire. I chose to go for education because it felt like the most practical choice.
Mm-hmm.
There's, quite a bit of uncertainty when taking a career in the arts. And so my values for practicality probably won out. And so I chose to go to school for teaching. But I also knew that with teaching, there are time periods in that calendar that are wide or open, summers and holidays, and so that I could still pursue writing, if I wanted to in my free time.
Mm-hmm.
So I got my education degree and I started teaching, but I couldn't really shake the itch to want to tell stories. And so my first couple years of teaching, my husband coached 3 sports. He's also a teacher. He coached football and hockey and baseball. And before that meant that I spent a lot of time after school on my own.
You never saw the man.
Yeah.
That's every season. He only missed basketball, right?
Right. Which I would have preferred because it's warmer than hockey.
Right.
And so in that extensive free time before we had kids, I did a lot of writing. And so that kind of propelled me to say hey, I really do want to do this. And so with that free time, I started pursuing writing more. And then I've self-published several books and had, some success with them. And that just kind of pushed me further and further to want to try to write. And so a few years ago, it's probably 3, maybe 4 years ago, I left public school teaching, and now I teach part-time at Western Technical College, but just 12 hours a week. So it leaves me lots of time now to write lots of things.
Sure.
That was a long answer.
No, that's excellent. What do you teach at the technical college?
I teach Intro to College Writing, and then also we have a program called Embedded Support. And so we've identified the classes where that students most often struggle in. Like there's 4 classes that everybody has to take. And they had, like, English Comp is one of them. And we noticed that there was a large fail rate there. And so the college has decided to put a co-teacher in each of those classes to help. So it's more than a teacher's aide. It really is co-teaching, but with the emphasis on helping students write successfully. So sometimes I'm in an English Comp class. Sometimes I'm in a psych class. This past semester I was in accounting class, knowing nothing about numbers, but helping them write their accounting reports. So, yeah, just the college has really made bold moves to say, like, how can we help people be successful? So I get to step in, like, as the writing guru. Like, even though you're an accountant and you don't really like numbers, like, it's still a part of your job. So how can we help you best learn those skills?
Boy, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's really good work. I like it a lot.
So share with us your independent writing program, Story Seedlings.
Yeah, okay, that's so fun. So, okay, I want you to imagine that you want to write a novel, but you don't really know how to start. You've got all these ideas in your head, but you aren't quite sure how to get them down on paper and organize them. I feel like that's a pretty common problem. Like, often, I don't know if you ever have this experience, but you tell people you're a writer, and they go, oh, I have a great idea for a book. Does that ever happen?
Everybody's got a book, right?
All the time, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't know how to move forward with it. So Story Seedlings is a program that helps people get started. So it's kind of like if you want to make a meal, you go to the grocery store and you buy all of your ingredients. And then you go home and you assemble them, and then eventually you get to eat. Story Seedlings is like the part of the process where you go to the store and assemble all the ingredients. You know, you need characters, you need conflict, you need dialogue, climax, resolution. You need all of these parts. And Story Seedlings walks you through the process one prompt at a time.
Wow.
And with each prompt, I also give you resources and tips and strategies for making that part of your story the best that it can be. So Monday through Thursdays, there's a prompt every single one of those days. Friday is a free write. And then I say weekends are for catching up. Because,
okay.
You know, life is busy and hard. And so you could get through the whole thing in 6 weeks, or you could take it, you know, as fast or as slow as you wanted. But hopefully then when you get all the way through the program, you've, got a bunch of your ideas down on paper and now can, you know, take steps forward to work with them more, or, and you've developed a daily writing habit of making time and putting energy into this thing that you've talked about for a long time but haven't really sat down to accomplish before.
Wow. How long have you had that program?
I would say probably about 2 years.
Okay.
I started running it as a workshop first, just trying to like take an afternoon to walk people through it, you know how it started? I did a 30-day writing challenge, and I invited people to participate in like a Google Classroom style where everybody would write to the prompts and then offer feedback to each other. And people liked it, but they just said it was like too much. They couldn't do it every single day. And it was really difficult to find the time to write their own scene and give feedback to others. And so then I developed the more independent program where people could work through at their own pace and get feedback from me if they wanted. I know that I would love to write every day but other people aren't quite as word nerdy as I am, or like, or maybe I don't want to talk down other people, say they're not as disciplined or devoted or whatever, but like it takes a while to work into the writing life. And so by putting it in this 6-week independent program, it just made it more accessible for more people to get through what I had prepared. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So, is there a success story you can share with us from that program?
Yes. My friend Alice Benson, she's a part of my writing group, Mississippi Valley Writers Guild. She has a few books out, and she knew that she wanted to write another book, but she just felt stuck and kind of trapped and just felt like she was spinning her wheels. But then she took the story Seedlings. She came to one of the workshop versions where we worked through several of the scenes together and share feedback. And she said that after, the 5-hour day with the group, she was unstuck. She had written more in our workshop time together than she had in like the previous 2 months. She was totally on track to get going with this story now. And that was so amazing for me because it's not like she was a beginning writer and I was just like getting her going. Like she was a successful writer even before it, but just needed that nudge to get her ideas loose and rolling. And I was so pleased that I could help her in that way.
Wow. I find that a very innovative program. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So tell us then about your Take Action author plan.
Yeah. Okay. So the Take Action author plan is a course, independent course again, to help people learn how to self-publish their book, how to market their book, and how to level up their author career. So when I first started dipping my toe in the waters of the writing world, I did not know about self-publishing. It was actually kind of new back in 2013, or new to me at least. It wasn't.
No, it was new then. Yeah, CreateSpace,
yeah.
I think, just happened about that time period.
Yeah, and I was working with an indie press called Chapter Books for Kids. They had published my Orphan Train Writer stories, which were my first stories. And I kept going to the owner, Teresa, and saying, Teresa, what if we did a series about this or about that or about princesses? Or like, I just was so enamored with the fact that someone was publishing my books, and I wanted to do more of it. And eventually, I think she might have gotten tired of my persistence and just said, Amanda, I can teach you how to do this yourself, and then you don't need me. And it was so empowering to know that I could do this myself, that I didn't need to wait, for an agent or a publisher to say yes, that I could, take action and move forward on my own. I will say that my first books, sometimes I look back at them and I cringe a little bit. I think any artist or musician or writer, like they look back at their early work and they're like, oh, I could have done better, because we know more now, right? And so there is a little bit of that, like, I guess I wouldn't call it a problem, but there can be that downfall of self-publishing, that you could put something out there in the world that isn't industry standard because nobody gets to tell you no. You get to say yes to everything.
Mm-hmm.
But without those first books and maybe their mistakes, I wouldn't have learned what I know now, and I wouldn't have gotten some success, the taste of success early on, and I think I would have felt defeated and not been able to persist and keep going. And so I'm so grateful to Teresa for teaching me how to do it and for all the things I've learned along the way. And I want to be able to be that person for other people. We live in the Midwest, far away from the publishing hotspot.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we can run into an editor for lunch, or I'm not sure if that thing really happens in New York City either, but like it just feels less accessible to those of us in the middle of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time when I first started self-publishing, I lived in Toma, Wisconsin. It's a lovely place. I have the most amazing friends there, but it's this tiny town of 8,000 people. We didn't have a bookstore for most of when I lived there. When I left to go write, I would write at the bowling alley because it was the friendliest place to write. Like, they were always like, "Is it too loud? Can we get you some water? Is it too dark? Like, what do you need?" And I wasn't afraid of the work. I wasn't afraid of putting time and energy into it. I just didn't know what to do until I met Teresa. And so the Take Action Author Plan is my attempt to help people who were like me, who want to do this thing, but maybe just don't know how to do it. And so it very clearly walks you through all of the steps of everything you need to do. It also tells you how much everything's going to cost, because that's another scary part of it, is like, I want to do this thing, but I don't want to make poor financial decisions. Like, I work very hard not to like take anything out of my family's savings. Like, I save up until I have enough money to do what I want. I never want it to be a detriment to my family's finances, only a benefit. But people you just don't know, and people don't often talk about money. So like in the Take Action Author Plan, I give you a case study of my book, Close Quarters, and I tell you how much I paid every single step along the way. And then I also tell you how much I made off that book in 1 year, just to give people an idea. Because I think there's this myth out there that if you publish a book, it's going to be your retirement plan or pay for your vacation or things like that. And for some people, yes, it can. But I also think people need to know that if they're going to put in all of this time and energy and heart and effort into this, I feel like we should let them know what they're going to financially get out of it.
You know, that is critical. You are absolutely right. People do not realize what it's going to cost, and they also don't realize. My experience is that it takes time. You know, you don't launch a book and make $1,000 off of it in the first month. It just doesn't happen. So, you know, all of your investments up front, and your payback is often years, I think.
Yep, it is. But you know, the one thing I love many things about writing books, but the one very cool thing about the finances of books is once you write it and publish it, like, yes, you have to market it, but when someone buys it, it's not a lot of work. It's not like booking a massage or like commissioning a painting. Like, if they buy the book, you just hand it over. It's not like, okay, someone bought the book, and so now I need to do a half hour worth of work in order to get it to them. Like, it's done. You just have to hand it over. And so, you know, some people call books passive income because, you know, you just hand it over. I would say, I wouldn't say it's passive because there is a lot of work. But once they pay for it, you do just hand it over. There's not a lot of work in that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Perfect sense. So I know that you write in multiple genres and for a variety of age groups. Why are you so expansive in your writing?
For me, it's more about the story idea. That's the thing that excites me the most, is when I get an idea for a story, and that's more important than who is it for or what genre does it fit in.
Okay.
I was a middle school ELA and reading teacher for 12 years, and so my heart is firmly in the middle grade world. I'm a member of SCBWI, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and so I first started writing kids' books for middle schoolers, because that's what I love and that's what I want to do. But I've had Teresa, the one who first got me started, approached me about writing a book that was going to go along with several other books. There were 6 authors. Everybody was going to write a story that took place in a northern state at Christmas time. It had something to do with hot chocolate, and it was for adults.
Now there's a challenge.
Yeah. Yes, right? Here's your writing challenge. And then we would all market the books together, and because we were all telling all of our audiences about them, we would sell more, and they'd also sell them in a collection, and we'd each get a cut of the profits. And she asked me if I wanted to do that, and I was like, gosh, I've never written for adults before. But again, when I heard the 3 prompts, I got this idea, and I was like, okay, yeah, I can do this. I'm going to give it a try. And what I discovered, even though I never intended to write for adults, I discovered two things. One, it was easier than writing for children because I didn't have to worry about vocabulary level. I didn't have to worry about appropriateness for particular age ranges. I didn't have to think about what content can I tie this into for school curriculum to make it more saleable. I just had to tell a good story. That was like the only requirement. And so it was easier than I thought, just because there were less pieces of the puzzle that I had to have in the right spot. The other thing I discovered about writing for adults is that adults will tell you they liked your book. They will find you, like at the grocery store or church, or they'll send you a Facebook message. And it sounds a little vain, but it's really lovely when people tell you that they liked your work.
Oh, yes. That's very natural.
And when people would buy my kids' books and give them to the kids, I'm one layer removed from the child, right? And the child won't often have even the means, even if they have the desire to reach out and tell me, hey, I liked your book, they don't have the means to do that. And so it was really, really fun to have people tell me they liked what I wrote, and I got more praise and feedback for one, like, little novella than in like 6 months than I had in the prior, like, 3 or 4 years of writing for kids. And I was like, hey, this is kind of nice.
Yeah.
I kind of like this.
Interesting.
And then the last piece of it is that there are some pretty strong gatekeepers in the Kidlit community, and I 100% get why they are there. But librarians and parents and educators want to give their children the best literature, and I admire them for that. But it makes it a little bit more difficult for someone who's self-published to convince those gatekeepers that my work is as good or valuable or comparable to the household names. You know, they want to give their kids something they know is good, they know they're going to love, that they see on the shelves at Target and Barnes and Noble. And so I've had a little bit more trouble selling my kids' books than I do my adult books and cultivating an audience. And now, as somebody who makes a big chunk of their living on writing, I need to think about that. You know, I could spend 6 to 9 months writing a kid's book and self-publish it and not sell very many, or I could do that with one of my adult books and know that I already have that audience built and they're going to buy it. So I still would love to publish kids' books, but I don't know that I will do it through self-publishing anymore, just because of what I've experienced in the past with my other books. I'll continue to self-publish my adult books all day long.
Sure.
But with my kids' books, I am going to pursue traditional publishing for the reasons I've just said.
Interesting. Well, I know that you have 2 adult book series. The first is called Champion Chocolatier, and the second is called Close Quarters. First question is, why did you decide up front to write a series?
So for Champion Chocolatier, I didn't intend to write a series. It was part of that collection I was telling you about, where you had to write a story that takes place in a northern state at Christmas time with hot chocolate. I only intended to write the one book, but then through a series of different events, I got the rights back to that story. I bought them back from the small indie publisher. And so I had that story, and people asked me, like, hey, what's going to happen to Emmy next? Like, is there a sequel coming? And I was like, I don't know. and then I had a friend who went on HGTV's Holiday Baking Championship. So you guys are in the Madison area, so you might not know her. But in the La Crosse area, Jen Barney of Meringue Bakery is a big deal, because she went on this, national TV show, and she won twice.
Wow.
And it was just so exciting for her and for the town. And I was like, oh my gosh, what if my main character, Emmy, who owns a chocolate shop, what if she went on a reality cooking show? And then I asked Jen. I was like, Jen, can I, like, read your blogs and come watch you at the bakery? And can I, like, ask you about your experiences and, like, kind of fictionalize it for my series? And she said, yes. And so then I wrote the second book. And then something happens at the end of the book that would need to lead it to a third book. And I started recently writing the fourth one in that series. So I didn't intend for it to be a series initially, but it's grown and the ideas just keep coming. So I'm not going to say no to them, especially when people are asking for them.
Oh, absolutely.
So then Close Quarters came about. So Champion Chocolate Cheer takes place in Duluth. I wrote it about Duluth, Minnesota, because my husband's family vacations there frequently. I'd done all the touristy things, Grandma's restaurant and the aerial lift bridge and the ski resort and the Glensheen Mansion, like all of the things. And I had so much fun writing about that town. And I was like, you know what? I should write one about La Crosse, because I grew up here. I live here. Like, I know all about the city, and I could do what I did for Duluth, for La Crosse, in this story. And so I talked with my critique group about, different plots that I could set in our town. And then the other aspect of it is I am one, so the story, Close Quarters, is about four cousins who open a bookstore downtown La Crosse in honor of their grandmother who passes away. And the cousin part of the story, I'm one of 10 cousins on my mom's side. I'm the second oldest. 8 of us are girls, all the way from age 37 to 25. We live in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Colorado, Massachusetts, Montana, like all over. Some have kids, some are married, some are not. But we text every single day, this group of the 8 of us. And we are each other's closest friends. We have, years and years of memories together. I just thought that was so special. There are not a lot of stories about cousins, at least that I had encountered. And so I was like, I want to make a family story about cousins. Now I narrowed our personalities down to 4 because, even George R.R. Martin with 7 plot lines, that was a lot to follow. I couldn't handle 8.
It is a lot, yeah.
So I boiled it down to 4, the 4 cousins. And so the cousins in the city of La Crosse, those were what I wanted the story to be about. And I threw in the bookstore for good measure because we've already said I'm a word nerd, and so that felt fun too. Interesting.
So would you like to read a selection for us?
Yeah, I would love to. I'm going to read the back of the book of Close Quarters, just so you kind of have, I told you a little bit about it, but just so you have an idea of what we're going to jump into. Here we go. Kelly, Lindsay, Mia, and Harper grew up not only as cousins, but as best friends. Kelly has always been the dreamer, and Lindsay the one with all her ducks in a row. Mia claimed the role of wild child the day she was born, and Harper will forever be the baby. Separately, they are flawed, but together, the Ames cousins are convinced they can do anything. Then, without warning their grandmother, the infamous Midwestern literary critic Ingrid Ames dies. Suddenly, they find themselves unsure of how to move forward without her guiding presence in their lives. As they attempt to pick up the pieces after the funeral, the cousins come together to open a bookstore in her honor. And so that's where we're going to start, is right after the funeral.
Okay.
Chapter 1, Kelly, February. I should tell you that each chapter is told by a different cousin. So it's rotating perspectives. And then you had asked about the series question, and I didn't finish that thought. So there are going to be 4 books in this series. The first 2 are out. And in each story, one of the cousins gets to be the main character. So, it's mostly about her. So in this first book is mostly about Kelly, the oldest. The second book is mostly about mostly about Harper, the youngest. And I haven't decided who gets a turn next.
Okay. Fair enough.
Chapter 1, Kelly, February. Well, that sucked, Mia said. I thought it was a nice service, Lindsay replied. Ugh, Lindsay, don't be such an adult, Harper griped. You know what she means. Oh, yeah, Lindsay said quietly. You're right. The women around the bonfire fell silent, and the question that had been nagging Kelly all day boiled inside her, bubbling its way up her throat and closer to the tip of her tongue. The question had formed as the recessional hymn echoed in the vaulted ceilings of the church rafters. It got a bit louder as the coffin was lowered into the still frozen ground and her toes lost their feeling. It became more insistent as the dishes from the family-only luncheon were cleared away and washed. Now sitting around the bonfire underneath the star-streaked winter sky, Kelly couldn't keep the question inside any longer. Now what? For a minute they gazed into the fire in silence, each cousin lost in her own thoughts, own emotions, own memories. Kelly snuggled into the cowl neck of her sweatshirt and hugged the quilt around her shoulders closer. She felt a stab of familiarity at the scent lingering to the hand-stitched fabric and was instantly crushed under a tsunami of memories. Learning to play solitaire as she and Graham laid on the floor and a storm raged outside. Christmas mornings with every available seat occupied and the smell of homemade cinnamon rolls in the air. Sitting on the deck swing singing. The fire popped, sending a spark flying. Kelly was pulled from her memories back into the present. She followed the embers' ascent with her eyes and then looked back down at her cousin's sad, moping faces around the fire. Harper was brooding, and Mia's face was unashamedly shedding a solid stream of tears. Kelly met Lindsay's sad eyes and then gave her hand a squeeze. As the oldest, Kelly felt a sudden urge of responsibility to cheer them up. Everybody stand up, she said. Go on, fill your glass, and then get up. You're not the boss of me, Harper said, her pout so large it was clearly visible across the fire. You know I am, Kelly said. Now get up. Harper groaned but followed Kelly's instructions. The bay beyond the beach was quiet, and as they stood, their boots crunched loudly in the still night air. The sound assaulted Kelly's ears. Usually they'd have bonfires barefoot, the summer humidity and sand clinging to the skin of their tan arms and legs. The snow was just another reminder that everything was wrong. Kelly shook it off and lifted her glass and was pleased to see the other girls do the same. A toast to Graham, Kelly started. She looked up to the sky, searching for the right words, and after a second or two she continued. To the woman who let me have ice cream for breakfast and who read me books on the porch. To Graham, who was the best road trip partner anyone could ask for and who made us close. To a great-grandmother and an even better friend. Lindsay lifted her glass a bit higher and went next. To Graham, who took us camping and bought us lace gloves for Easter. Who ran a half marathon with me and helped me write my scholarship essays. To a woman who worked for herself before being a girl boss was cool. Mia took a breath. To Graham, who took me to my first casino and painted my nails before I could do it myself. Mia paused for a second to wipe her running nose. Who taught me how to keep book at a baseball game and the importance of lying still to look at cotton candy clouds and constellations in the sky. And then, as usual, Harper brought up the rear. To Graham, who bought me the prom dress my mom said was too expensive, who gave me her cameo necklace when I turned 10 and made me feel so grown up, who taught me that an appropriately placed swear word can be a source of joy. The girls lifted their glasses high and said in unison, to Graham. Then they took a deep drink and settled back into their chairs. Kelly felt a little better. Her mood was lifted further when she saw the toast had helped her cousins, too. Harper was the first to break the silence. So we're all rich now. That made everyone laugh. I guess you're right, Lindsay said. Anybody thought about what they're going to do with their inheritance? I had no idea it was coming, Mia said, but it took me all of 5 seconds to figure out I could erase my credit card debt. You have that much credit card debt? Lindsay blurted. Thanks for not judging, Mia said and stuck out her tongue. Lindsay blushed. Sorry, Mia. Forgiven, Mia replied. I'll have a bunch left over, but the credit card will be paid off first. Good for you, Lindsay said. I haven't come up with anything good yet. I can always just stick it in the kids' college fund. Mia rolled her eyes. Good Lord, live a little, she hollered across the fire. Kelly surprised them all when she sat up a little straighter and announced, I'm opening a bookstore. Really? Lindsay asked. Where? In one of the new retail spots on 2nd Avenue, downtown by the Southside Fest Grounds. I thought there were just old warehouses there, Harper said. You gotta come home more often, Kelly said. Not anymore. They're restoring the buildings and turning them into business spaces and apartments. The landmark properties, I think they're called. And one of them belongs to me. Already, Mia asked. I thought I was the impulse buyer of the group. Kelly shrugged. It just felt right. I'm going to call it Garden of Readin, in memory of Graham. Well, that sounds freaking fantastic, Harper said. As she stood up, her boots shifted slightly in the snow, causing her to sway as she held up her glass. Cheers to Kelly. For Kelly, the rest of the night was a blur. The next day, she couldn't tell her husband what time they doused the fire in snow, climbed the stairs arm in arm, and poured themselves onto their grandmother's couch. She vaguely recalled a few neighbors peeking out of their windows as the girls walked up from the beach in the early morning light, singing Ein Prosit at the top of their lungs. But no complaints had been made. Kelly knew the neighbors had loved Ingrid, too, and the girls as an extension of her. Everyone grieved in their own way, and Kelly assumed that the neighbors now knew that the Ames girls did it with fire in their eyes and a song in their heart. Lindsay was the first to wake. When Kelly joined her in the kitchen, the scent of cinnamon rolls was already in the air. There was one last batch in the freezer. Lindsay answered Kelly's wordless question. She nodded and went to brush the hangover off her teeth. When she returned to the kitchen, she saw Harper and Mia wrapped in quilts and seated at the counter. The cinnamon rolls worked their magic quickly, filling their stomachs with sugar and carbs, chasing away the nausea of their drinking last night. So, Kelly, a bookstore? Harper asked. Kelly sat up straight, her face awash in guilt like a toddler cut out of bed. Who told you? She asked. You did, wasty face, Harper said. Kelly looked to Lindsay and Mia, who nodded confirmation. You had a lot of wine, Lindsay said gently. Oh, yeah, Kelly said. I did. I mean, I am. I've been thinking now that Ramona's in school, I'm ready to work outside the home again, but I don't want to do something part-time, and nights and weekends don't work. I wanted to do something meaningful, something that would give back to the world and be good for our community. Well, good for you, Harper said. It came out of her mouth dripping with hungover sarcasm, but Kelly knew deep down she meant the words. Garden of Readin is a great name, Lindsay said. If there were three things Graham loved, besides us, it would be books, flowers, and Jesus. Kelly laughed. Those are my thoughts exactly. Kelly took a bite of her cinnamon roll, relishing the sweetness of the sugary frosting and the zing of the cinnamon on her tongue. She hadn't expected to feel so happy the day after her grandmother's funeral. She wondered if she should feel guilty about the excitement the bookstore was building in her chest. She knew her grandmother wouldn't want her to be miserable. It wasn't like she was forgetting her and moving on. It was the opposite. But still, the guilt was there. A little. The rest of her, however, was ready to plant these new seedling bookstore ideas. She couldn't wait to see how they would grow. The cousins spent the rest of the day lounging in sweat, sharing memories and napping. No one wanted to leave, fearing it meant that anything to do with Graham was officially over. Life without her wasn't one they were particularly excited to be a part of, but eventually it was time to go their separate ways. Harper headed back to school in Madison, seemingly dreading her last semester. Mia hit the road about the same time for her 14-hour drive back to Dallas. At least warm weather will be waiting for me, she said as she shivered and gave her cousins hugs goodbye. Lindsay left next with plans to stop by the funeral home to pick up the picture board she had created for her grandmother. The task of resorting the photos in the appropriate album was one she said she was not looking forward to. And that left Kelly last. As she locked the door behind her, she hoped that this wasn't the end of a golden age. She had been sad when Gramps died, but this felt different. Now there was no one left in the original Ames generation. At least, in her mind, that's how it felt. She knew there were relatives that came before, but they'd had little influence on her. How would she navigate life when the people who had built the foundation of hers were gone? She tried to find a little of the enthusiasm she had felt earlier this morning and said a silent prayer that this bookstore idea would be one way to carry their grandmother with them. And that's the end of chapter 1.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Good first chapter. Sets up the whole rest of the book, I can tell, just by listening.
Great.
So I took some time to review your website, and I have to compliment you. You have one of the best author websites I've ever seen.
Oh, that means so much to me, Rex. Thank you. I just launched this new version that you looked at just last week, so I'm so pleased to hear you say that.
Well, which leads to my next question. How did you develop that site? Oh, and first, why don't you tell our audience what the website is so that they can go look at it also?
So my website is my name, amandazieba.com. And it goes back to, I told you that I had that business coach who helped me develop the concept of word nerd. And I had recently had her do overview, like an assessment, evaluation, that's the word I'm looking for, evaluation of my website. And she, her name is China Haas. You can go to her website too, chinahaas.com. And she had said, you have so many great things on this website. She'd helped me develop it like 5 years ago, and I just kept adding things like my blog and the Story Seedlings program and Take Action Author Plan, like a lot of those things that we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But she's like, it's really difficult to find. Like, I feel bad that people aren't, utilizing your stuff more, but it's just because they can't find it on your website. So you need to think about how to do this. And she had recommended, think about it like a building. What kind of a building, what kind of a feel do you want it to have, atmosphere? And I was thinking about, all the different things that I have. And at first I was like, well, maybe it's like a bookstore. But then I was like, well, it's more than a bookstore. There's like, a school component of it too. And then like, how do I fit in the writing help? And so what I came up with is that it's more like a city. And there are all of these different buildings in my city, and each building is for a different, purpose and a different person. And so that's how Word Nerdopolis was born, was thinking about all these different places in my world that I wanted people to go and things that I had to offer them. So when you go to Word Nerdopolis, you will see a bookstore to buy books, and you'll see a school that has all sorts of resources for educators, lessons I've developed, videos I've made for them. There is a gym, and that's for the writers. You can go to your writing workouts and find Story Seedlings and Take Action Author Plan and all of that stuff there. There is the restaurant called the Blog Buffet, where you can see all the blog pieces. There's a movie theater for all my YouTube videos. And then a general store to get, all my favorite Word Nerd stuff, and a post office. I think that's all of them. So by going into each of the buildings, you can get the thing that hopefully you came looking for.
Interesting. So what was your inspiration to do the first chapter videos?
So if people are like, hey, that book looks good, but I'm not really sure I want to read it, or who is this Amanda Zieba? I want to get a taste of her stories before I pay money for them. You can try out my books for free through those first chapter videos too.
What has reader response been to, especially when you read your book's first chapters?
People really like them. I especially find that it's a great fit for book clubs. So I love to visit book clubs. I'll visit them, virtually through Skype or FaceTime, or like if it's a book club in my hometown, I'll just go to the book club and hang out with them after they've read my story, and answer questions for them. And it's always a fun evening. But when, people, it's their turn, to take the book to book club or to make the suggestion, they can share my video link with their book club, and then they can just give it a try and say like, oh yeah, that does sound good. I would like that.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like we were talking about earlier, it's hard to sometimes choose a local author when there are so many household names out there. Why would you pick somebody you don't know when you could pick something that's like almost guaranteed to be a hit? And so by having these videos out there, book clubs especially can give it a try, with zero obligation. And then it often hooks them, and they say, yes, I do want to read that book.
Brilliant. I just, and they're fun to watch. I want to tell the audience that go to your website, go to Amanda's website and watch them. They're just fun to watch. So I also want to talk about, you do 5 good things that you send out on the first and third Thursday of the month. What was your inspiration for that?
Well, in the book marketing world, in any small business, a big business, email newsletters are like the hot ticket item. They say that, a Facebook crashed or Instagram crashed or YouTube crashed, like you wouldn't have access to any of the people who subscribed to you or liked your page. And so to get an email list going of people who are interested in your work is the best thing to do. And so I wanted to share things with people through my email list to make it valuable for them. I wanted to let them know that I had good things to share and that I knew what I was talking about. And, during this pandemic, and there's so much negativity in our world and so many hard things. And, we can get weighed down by them, or we can try to fix them and to focus on the good. And so this newsletter is my attempt to just bring a little positivity to people's world, but in a curated type fashion. So I have 3 newsletters. One is for readers, one is for writers, and one is for teachers. And I just share out, things that I'm doing, updates on my book projects, free resources, videos with helpful content, in an effort to help people and spread positivity, and hopefully they do that.
You do blogs, you've got the newsletters, you have your own writing. How do you organize yourself to get all that done?
That is a good
I'm getting
question,
tired just hearing about it.
It is a lot to manage. I will say that it is such a huge gift that my kids and husband are back in school, because when I drop my boys off at school, I come home, and from 8:30 to 3:30, I have to work. I'm home by myself. And I owe a huge shout out to my parents for being highly disciplined people, because I now have those traits. I probably take 20 minutes to a half hour for lunch, but otherwise I'm working from 8:30 to 3:30. And I know that for a lot of people, when they're at home working, they could, get distracted or do other things. But I really, truly do work a lot of hours. Also, then when my kids go to bed at 8, my computer often pops back out on my lap from 8 to 10. So first of all, I put in a lot of time into it. The other thing that I'll say is that I just operate by deadlines. Whatever is due next, that's what I work on until it's done, and then I go to the next thing. So like my blog comes out every Wednesday, and this morning I sat down on my desk. I was like, oh, that is not done yet. I'm usually further ahead. Like before I do anything else, like I have to get this blog post done. So then I got that done. Or I knew that this interview was coming up, and so I was like, yesterday I was like, all right, I gotta sit down and learn a little bit about, Rex and his show and what I should talk about. And my students at Western, this is the end of the semester. So after I get done with you, I will go and I will work on some grading for them. Now, the only problem with this is if you don't set your own deadlines for your own projects, like Champion Chocolatier number 4 that I've started writing, that has gotten pushed to the bottom of the list quite frequently, really, truly more than it should. But I'm the only one who's making that deadline. And so I need to make that deadline a higher priority, or the book isn't going to get finished, because there is always something else that I could work on. So setting deadlines, even when they're your own, and making them important is probably the key to getting everything done.
Sure. So have you ever experienced either dry spells or writer's block?
I have more ideas than time to write them all down, so that writer's block isn't necessarily a problem for me. But so there's 3 phases of my writing process, and 1 is write the book, 2 is self-publish the book, and then 3 is market the book. And step 1, write the book, usually takes me 5 to 7 months, depending on how much time I put into it. Self-publishing the book takes about 6 to 8 weeks, and then you will market it until you die. So the problem that I have is leaving step 3 and getting back to step 1, because there's always something you can do to market. That job is never, ever done. And so getting back to the writing is the thing that takes me the longest, which is so silly because it's the part that I like the most. But that's my struggle that I'm working on now is to find time for that writing, because I am attempting to do so many other things.
Sure. What have you found is some of the most effective things that you've done to attract readers to your books?
Being out in person is really key for me. I like talking to people. Like, some people, like talking with you on the radio, that would make some people nervous, but I'm like, man, I get to talk about myself for a whole hour. This is going to be so fun. Which I know is not very Midwestern of me, but I like talking to people. I like sharing my experiences and what I have. And so if I can usually meet a person in person or on a podcast like this, I can convince them to buy my books or to at least give them a try. So things like conferences, school visits, book clubs, talking at libraries. I've talked to some Girl Scouts sometimes. Like, I've helped them earn some different writing badges. So anything that I can do to be in person with people and create a relationship with them has really been the most effective in my sales. My website and my YouTube stuff has, started because taking more an important role because of, quarantine and stay-at-home orders, because I can't do that in-person stuff. So those are my attempts to let people into my life and to see me and get to know me without being in person. But I'm really excited to get back to the conferences and in-person events, because then I'll be able to tell more people about that stuff that I've been working hard to create, rather than just rely on like SEO and algorithms to lead people to me.
Sure. So during the pandemic, what has it been like for you to shift and have to do things by Skype or Zoom or whatever?
Yeah, it's been really hard, and I've had to think creatively. So Champion Chocolatier number 3, called For Better or Worse, launched in April, and I did not have a pandemic marketing plan because nobody knew it was coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knew we'd be at home. And so the book is about a wedding. And I had all these events planned to be at bridal shows. Like, I was going to go where the brides were, because it was a book about a wedding.
Mm-hmm.
At a Charlotte's Bridal in La Crosse, a bridal boutique, and the wedding expo in Madison I was going to go to, and everything was canceled. We couldn't do it. So I ended up doing a Facebook Live to tell people about the book. And in the Facebook Live, I wore my wedding dress.
That's clever.
I was like, well, maybe if people see me in my wedding dress, they'll at least stop scrolling and listen in for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't zip up all the way, but nobody could see the back, so it was all right.
You really didn't have to admit that, Amanda.
We're still decent on camera. But, so just trying to do creative things like that to capture people's attention. For Close Quarters number 2, called A Pivotal Pause, which is actually a book about the pandemic, about what the cousins do. I had an outdoor launch party at Restore Public House in right by UWL in La Crosse. They had those outdoor igloos.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. And so I rented one of those, and people pre-ordered their books, and they would just kind of like do a drive-by. It's like a drive-by book launch party, and they would like order their food and pick up their book and their food and then go home. And we really lucked out. It was a beautiful night. It was like, a 60-degree day in November, which doesn't, hardly ever happen. But, the book gods were smiling down upon me.
Right.
So being in a space that was outdoors and semi-safe and people were masked, and I think just trying to think creatively about how to still get to your people, even when you can't, throw a big party. Mm-hmm. And back, when we can throw parties, I would say to somebody who's thinking about self-publishing or having a book launch party or whatever, is like, nobody's going to make a big deal about you right away. And so you need to be willing to make a big deal about yourself. And that, like, confidence and that those efforts will be seen as success by other people, even if you haven't sold, anything yet. But like, oh, they've got this big party, they must be a big deal, and then that will just start the ball and the momentum rolling. So don't be afraid to celebrate your accomplishment and to throw a party, because that kind of gets things jump started.
Interesting. So do you feel that the pandemic affected your own personal creativity anyway, or did it change it or mold it in any different way?
Well, I'm used to spending a lot of time by myself. So even though I'm super social, I went from spending, all day by myself, like I said, 8:30 to 3:30, I'd exercise by myself, eat by myself, drive by myself. When the pandemic happened, everybody was home. I have two sons, they're 11 and 8, and my husband's an educator. And so all of a sudden, everyone was home all the time. And I always felt like I should be with them, and spending time with them. And we did so many fun, amazing things. We'd go for a bike ride every day. We instituted happy hour at my house during, like, the real thick of the stay-at-home order, like, from March, April, May, June. We had happy hour every day at 4 o'clock. We played Rummy Cube and had snacks and, the occasional cocktail for the grown-ups, but juice boxes for the kids. And so I didn't have as much time to create because they were always there, and I wanted to be with them and spend time. So not necessarily my, like, desire to create, but my ability time-wise to create was impacted.
Sure. That makes sense. Well, Amanda, we've had a wonderful conversation this morning. Your energy level just comes right through the phone, right out into the studio, I have to tell you. It's amazing.
Thank you. I've had so much fun. I really appreciate the invitation to join you today.
All right. And as you launch new books, let me know. We'll talk again.
Okay, that sounds great. I'd love to.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. The closing music is by Milwaukee musician, performer, and composer Carrie Sherwood from her CD, Released from the Heart, and the song is called Connected. I'd like to remind listeners that you can still get books and movies and CDs at the Sun Prairie Public Library. You can also participate in virtual book clubs. There are virtual programs for all ages. You can find digital material on Hoopla and Libby, and you still can get printed material on Overdrive. The Dane County Dream Bus also visits Sun Prairie neighborhoods. Check the library website for the schedule. You can visit the library website at www.sunprairielibrary.org for details of all the programs, and I'm delighted to announce that on May the 10th, the library will be reopening to welcome you to come and browse for books and magazines and all those good things. The Sun Radio is underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie. And until next time, this is Rex Owens wishing you a creative life.